Good evening, one and all. Good evening, St. Kitts and Nevis, and to those of us who are online. We are joined tonight by CBN Radio and Television in the United States and British Virgin Islands, as well as the KCN Television in Anguilla. I want to especially emphasize that tonight is about you, the community of St. Kitts and Nevis, your concerns, your questions, and your edification. So next, I will be handing over to my co-moderator. I didn't say who I was. I am Dr. K. Nisbet. I am a proud Nevisian and resident here in Nevis. And my co-moderator is Mr. Glendale Herbert, who I'll be handing over to in just a minute to tell us a little bit about who Nevis Civil Society is and why this panel discussion and discussions like these are important. After that, we'll have an introduction, a short 3-minute introduction from the panelists, and that will be then followed by their presentations, and then we'll go into some questions afterwards. So again, the emphasis is you. Looking forward to your questions when we get there.
Good evening, everyone. Indeed, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to have all of you here with us tonight. So, the NCS, the Nevis Civil Society Coalition, was born out of the entire SSZ and the prospect of the Destiny Project. And all the information that has been coming out, it sort of just made us, we actually saw civil society all over the map for that, not speaking in one voice. And government spoke in one voice. The Bar Association spoke in their voice. The Chamber of Commerce spoke in their voice. Evangelicals spoke in their voice. And to none of these voices did they get a response or favorable look from government. And so it seems to me at that point, when I looked at it, and I've always known this, that a country is made up of 3 parts. A, government, which the civil society at the end of the day sends them to office for 5 or 4 years or whatever the number of years is based on the Constitution. Civil society is where the base of the people are, where the masses are. And there are different NGOs within civil society that cater to various parts of the masses, the country itself. And that's your tax base. That's who government should answer to. Of course, in the middle sits civil society. On the right-hand side sits government, who civil society agrees to send them to office for a period to run your affairs, and which in some places they can be recalled. That's in their constitution. In ours, there is not. We don't have that. But we have the civil society still retain the power of making demands and making those demands met by government, because the prospect of your 4-year term or 5-year term in government, you have to come back to civil society. That is the church, the congregations, all of those people. And so, like I said, a country is made up of 3 parts: government, civil society, and of course the business community. But when the business community buy into civil society, things change. Constitutions change. The entire landscape can change. It was civil society who ended slavery. It was civil society and the civil rights movement in the United States who drove the civil rights movement and changed the entire law and brought in all the accommodation laws of the 60s all the way through, civil rights laws. And that's why they call it civil rights laws, for the most part. So we recognize that around our parts where we live here, government have an overarching, almost like the overlords of society. And people tend to cower. And because civil society as a unit has not taken its rightful place in the country. So we decided to begin to band together and ask the members of different various civil society on the island of Nevis to come together, the leaders. And we met a number of times over the last 2 months. And here we are today, culminating in a town hall on the matter of SSZ and on the matter of the prospect of destiny. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a bit of the background from where we are. And tonight, like my co-host, Kay, said, we are going to be deliberating with our professionals here, our panelists, about these two issues, the SSZ and, of course, destiny. Before I go on, I would like to invoke a prayer and ask the Pastor Pemberton to come forward and bless us with a prayer as we move forward. A member of our Civil Society Evangelical.
Good evening, everyone. Jesus always encourages us to pray. So when you pray what you desire, believe that you have them, and you shall receive them. Let us pray. Father, we give you thanks tonight for your loving kindness, and we thank you for your mercy. And so we come to you tonight in the name of your Son, the Lord Jesus Christ, asking, O God, for your direction as we come together tonight to discuss the issues that are before us. We ask in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ, that you challenge you in our deliberation, understanding in our discussion, and we exemplify respect for each other. Let all things be done decently and in order tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. So now we will have just short introductions from our panelists, so about 3 minutes, for them to explain to us what they are expert in and why they are experts, so we can know why it is that we have chosen to listen to them. So let's please start with Mr. Glen Griffin. You can stand.
Folks, I am Glen Griffin. I am Emeritus Professor of Psychology in the Department of Critical Theory and Social Justice at Occidental College in Los Angeles. I was born here on the island of Nevis, in fact, in Gingerland. I now live, after many years abroad, in Gingerland again. I am here in my capacity not just as an academic, but also as a psychologist, clinical psychologist, professor of psychology. So I'll be speaking to this issue from the point of view of both of those angles, including and particularly critical theory and colonial theory.
Thank you very much. And so next we will have Mr. Chesley Hamilton.
Good evening to everyone. My name is Chesley O'Neill Hamilton, a lawyer by profession, born in the village of Keon, the island of St. Kitts, to Diana Hamilton and Valentine Grant. You'd like to put it that way because I like to tell people I am a black bastard from Keon. And I say that because there was a famous white bastard from here in Nevis that left here, went to St. Croix and on to the United States, who gave the United States 52 of its 84 federal papers, who carried the same last name. And I say that because I am not from Nevis and I'm invited here. Yes, I practice law in St. Kitts and Nevis, the BVI, and I'm qualified to carry out my profession throughout the English-speaking Caribbean. However, I'm called to the bar in Ontario, Canada. I was educated post-secondary at Seneca College, at York University, and the University of Ottawa, and then on to Hugh Wooding Law School. I say that by way of journey because I want, when I speak tonight, to bring all of those things into being and into play in terms of what I say. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. And next we'll have Mr. Daniel Arthurton.
Good evening to all of you who are here this evening and to all of the persons who are joining us through the various media. My name is Daniel Arthurton. I'm the son of a farmer. My grandmother was a farmer over at New River Estate. That's by my mother's side, and my grandmother by my father's side, she was the lady at the hospital who did the washing of all the clothes when they didn't have washing machines. She did it on her hand. My mother later came at the hospital and worked for 36 years. And she cooked for everybody, from the people, what they call in the poorhouse or infirmary, up to the private ward. My father was one of the pioneers in terms of developing the water infrastructure in Nevis, Camp Spring, for those persons who were here for a time. I take the time to say those things because I decided that I wanted to be a part of a relay that did something a little better than what they did. And so I went on from teachability school over in New River to boys' school in Charlestown, Guyana School of Agriculture, University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and to work myself through the civil service, local and regional civil service, international agencies, USAID, CEDA, United Nations, and got back to becoming the advisor to the governor of the central bank by the time I retired in 2019. And all that time I never forgot my roots, so now I've come back to base, and I'm a farmer at Nevis Hydro Gardens over in Cates Bay.
Wonderful, thank you. So how lucky are we to be able to hear from these experts in psychology, law, land rights, and economics. Not only that, but they also have a heart and a connection to the soil. So now we will hear a 15-minute presentation from them, so I stress just 15 minutes. And after that, we will have questions from the audience. So Mr. Herbert and I will be walking through and getting your questions, which I know many of you have. So first we will hear from Professor Glen Griffin, then Mr. Daniel Arthurton, and then Mr. Chesley Hamilton.
This might take 20 minutes. So as I've said already, I am Glen Griffin, Emeritus. Thank you. As I said already, I am Glen Griffin, Professor Emeritus in the Department of Psychology, Critical Theory, Occidental College in Los Angeles. I want to say a little bit more about my background. Again, I was born in Gingerland. I'm living now in Gingerland, having spent some 30 years or more in the United States and in the institutions that I've described. My people. So, people regularly ask me in Nevis, who are your people? I'll tell you. On my father's side, there is Reginald Griffin and Alberta Griffin. They are the parents of 16 children, including 2 sets of twins. So it's likely that some of you here or some of you online will know some of these individuals. After all, there are 16 of them. Quartus, Uslin, Jack. I am often, in fact, mistaken in public for my Uncle Tony. This is why it's important to live a good life, because everybody on Nevis who's mistaken me for my Uncle Tony has greeted me happily, warmly. Nobody's ever said to me, where's my money? Or, stop bothering my wife. I'm pretty sure that would not be the case with other of my uncles, but fortunately for me, I look like Uncle Tony. on my mother's side. My people there are the Walwins. Olive Sutton, the first woman headmaster of the Whitehall School, my mother's mother. Brother John Sutton, first elder of the Butlers Seventh-day Adventist Church. Together they made 4 pastors: Orville, Edson, Keith. So, the Walwins. Myrna is my cousin, and so is Swanee. It's important, I think, for me to say a little bit about this because I want you folks to know that I am happily returned, I think, to home. It has meant a lot to me to be back at home. When I got to the airport, I went through immigration, and the immigration officer said to me, "Welcome home." I almost cried. It was so warm a thing for me. So home matters to me, and I've come home to be really among my people. I'm going to say a little bit about my academic background because it matters here. My academic expertise is in European intellectual history, West Indian political thought. I have taught and written about Marcus Garvey, about the Guyanese intellectual Walter Rodney, famous for the book How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. I have spent a lot of time reading the work of Eric Williams, Capitalism and Slavery, psychiatrist Frantz Fanon, Wretched of the Earth, C.L.R. James, The Black Jacobins. Let's spend a minute with C.L.R. James. C.L.R. James is responsible for a book titled Beyond the Boundary. Among the many books that he's written, it is widely regarded as one of the most important publications in the relationship between sport and society. In that book, he achieves exactly the kind of thing that I think we need to do relative to destiny. C.L.R. James spent time looking at and thinking about cricket, among the other things. His argument is that cricketers from the West Indies were able to decolonize, might say, cricket. And how did they do that? By beating the British at their own game. That, I think, is essentially the task ahead of us when it comes to destiny. How to beat it at its own game. How to, as it were, take the insignia of colonialism and turn it into decolonization. As I see it, that is our task. So, in this intellectual tradition, or rather standing inside this intellectual tradition, I'd like to make an argument, a public argument. It's simple, it's straightforward, but it does contain some difficult things, some hard points. In fact, 2 or 3, things that might hurt. This is the argument. I will tell you the argument, I will tell you how we would do this, and I will tell you after that some details and some elaborations. Here's the argument. The Destiny Project and the Special Sustainability Zone is contemporary settler colonialism, plain and simple. It arrives now as the culmination of a set of colonizing fiscal concessions that we as a nation have been obligated to make since independence from Britain in 1983. Again, the Destiny Project and the Special Sustainability Zone is contemporary settler colonialism. It arrives now as the culmination of a set of colonizing fiscal concessions that we as a nation have been obligated to make since our independence from Britain in 1983. The task and the opportunity before us as Nevisians are to see the Destiny settlement for what it is and then to put it to work on our own decolonization. And by decolonization here, I mean fiscal independence. Fiscal independence is decolonization as I see it. It is sovereignty. In fact, it is precisely the definition of sovereignty that crypto-colonialists use. That's the argument. Are we together? So here's the how. How are we to reverse, undo, get ahead of this colonization project that has arrived at our shore? I think there are basically 4 steps here. Here's the first. First, we have to see through its self-representation. We must look through the project's benevolent self-description and self-authorization and set aside the vocabulary that removes the political, historical, and conflict elements from it. We must try to find a way to see beyond or see around or see through the language by which it defers accountability and discourages scrutiny. If you've paid attention, you will notice that there is a great deal of language surrounding the Destiny Project. We need a particular kind of lens and perspective in order to be able to see through it. Here's some of that language. Built out of love for Nevis, creating value for everyone, building for tomorrow, a project rooted in care and responsibility. That's the kind of language that I think we need to see through. We need to recognize the colonial strategies at work in the presentation and in the operation of this negotiation or this offer. One of them that I will want us to pay attention to is referred to as terra nullius, or that's the Latin for empty land. Notice, for example, how our land is talked about in the Destiny material. Land that is underdeveloped, underutilized, awaiting activation. This is developmentalism. It is also a language that nullifies the territory in ways that make it seem desperately in need of some attention. That might not be the case. So, we need to acquire a certain lens, a certain way of seeing, a way of seeing through. And we need to be able to name and describe this project for exactly what it is. Again, settler colonialism. Not a gift, at least not at face value. Furthermore, folks, I think it's important that everybody know that we know what this is. Everybody needs to know everywhere that we know that this is settler colonialism and that we are engaging it as such, not as manna from heaven. Second, we will need to recognize and expose the famous colonial mechanism of unequal exchange. Simply put, we need to know if what we're being offered is another version of Columbus beads. Remember those? Trinkets, bits of glass, cheap jewelry, scraps of cloth, all sorts of shiny things. We need to know whether or not that is in fact what we are being offered in this moment for our territory. For our territory, for the land, for the legal compromises and the sovereignty we offer at such high risk to ourselves. Are we being paid enough, really? Are we being offered enough at all, even close, for what we are giving up? I think that if we look again at what we are offering, or what is being taken and what is being offered, that we will want to change the negotiating terms dramatically, entirely. I think that the base renegotiating term will be sovereignty for sovereignty. In math, that's 50-50, not 80-20. I think 80-20 is some sort of a breakup rule that people have. Third, we need to alter the historic and economic horizon by which we see this encounter with destiny. The negotiating horizon is, I think, apparently too low. We should be negotiating for the absolute end of poverty on Nevis. We need to be negotiating for the end of financial insecurity. In fact, folks, I think we need to be negotiating for the end of our national debt. all $600 million of it. Fully 25% of the people on Nevis live below our own poverty line. That means that from where we're standing, 50% of us can see that poverty line. That means that for many of us, poverty is just one emergency, one accident, one hurricane away. That has to come to an end. If we negotiate at all with the extremely wealthy, it has to be for the end of poverty in Nevis, instantiated again by our $600 million national debt. This debt is like a monkey that eats half of everything we grow. It takes up fully 50% of our GDP. We spend 50% of the money we make to pay back a debt that colonization has put on our back again and again. Are we together? Finally, the fourth step is I think we need to build intellectual sovereignty. We need a way to counter rich elite advisory apparatuses, reduce information asymmetry and power. We need what I think is properly called a sovereign national think tank. That's the argument and that's the how. We are facing a new and evolved form of colonialism, and we have to evolve strategies for managing it. I think we have them, and I think we have models. Here is the elaboration of that argument. Here's the first point. Colonialism never ended. It never even came close to being ended. It's never stopped. It's never been interrupted. It continues. Between the 1950s and the 1980s, after the Second World War, there was a rapid dismantling of European colonialism. The Europeans could no longer, after those wars afford their colonies, and so they gave us our freedom, grossly speaking. An entire academic field was developed to understand the aftermath of colonialism. This is referred to as post-colonial studies. The main thing we discovered in post-colonial studies is that there's no post. There's no after, there's no second phase. It's been colonialism reinvented, reimagined the entire time. So, this means that we cannot say, as some of us are inclined to, that that is a thing of the past. That's a victim narrative. Let's move on. That was terrible, let it be over. It's not. You know what kind of conversation you have with someone when they say, let's move on, don't you? Let's just move on. Let's go ahead. Let's march forward, as if by some sort of manifest destiny. I think we need to go back here for a moment and recognize and remember that we are still very much in the throes of colonialism, precisely where we were at independence in 1983. Here I'll be quick. We got independence in 1983, but we were left essentially with nothing. Sugar plantation system was disappearing. We had severe structural weaknesses, we had unemployment, we had underemployment, we had lack of foreign reserves. The government, in fact, inherited the cost of governance without the assets to develop government. Literally, folks, we had nothing with which to make a country after we gained independence in 1983. This left us desperate. So in 1984, Nevis became the very first country, as many of you know, to adopt the Citizenship by Investment program. We thought that this would be a development strategy, or we described it as a development strategy, but actually was a survival strategy. We began to sell sovereignty. In the late 1980s and 1990s, we started another thing, offshore financing, offshore banking. It has brought a great deal of revenue to this island. Maybe not a great deal, but it's brought a significant amount of revenue to this island with great cost to us. 2025, legislators here decided to include crypto wealth in the information that citizens could use to establish their, or that individuals could use to establish citizenship here in Nevis. Understand this? We integrated cryptocurrency into our economy in a way that allowed CBI to be more influential or impactful. It is because of these various things, these three strategies, in fact, that we are now in the position to have to hear an offer from Destiny. Destiny is the culmination, it's the extension, it is really the full fruiting of a desperate economic practice that we set up, really a practice that has not ever escaped colonialism. So, Destiny is, as I see it, a colonial assemblage. When we asked Mr. Jansen, why Nevis? He replied, he's in a vision. He pointed to personal connections, a desire to give back. If it's framed in this way, the SSZ project appears safely grounded in goodwill and not in financial calculations at all. It is a kindness, a generosity, a benevolence, an opportunity for us. However, for more than a decade, as a Nevis citizen, Mr. Jansen has no doubt benefited from the fiscal arrangements, including citizenship by investment, that converted our national sovereignty into financial weakness and vulnerability. Are we clear? So here's another answer to the question, why he would bring Destiny to Nevis. For him, the SSZ and Destiny would assemble previously fragmented economic apparatuses into a single great opportunity. However, this opportunity is our extremity. His opportunity, which integrates these precarious and risky elements of our national survival strategy, puts us in further jeopardy. This is not, as the material says, doing development in the right way. It is exploitation. It is the exploitation, in fact, of the hurtful fiscal strategies Nevis has been compelled to adopt in the aftermath of colonial occupation. Here's a fourth elaboration on the argument. Destiny has been described as a pilot, a phased development, a carefully planned area, a low-impact, thoughtfully designed engagement. I think we might want to consider some alternative language, including the term beachhead. Destiny will be a foothold, a beachhead, a forward-positioned economic resettlement designed to anchor foreign wealth, normalize long-term presence, and secure infrastructure that enables deeper penetration both at home and abroad. Folks, if Destiny brings millionaires, venture capitalists, and developers to live among us in a Dubai of the Caribbean, we will have an acquisitive settlement of wealthy individuals alongside widespread poverty and fiscal insecurity. How is that going to work? Folks, that is not ethical development, neither is it stable. Frankly, how would it work to have such wealthy individuals living next to individuals living in poverty? It's a recipe for disaster. Folks, if this happens, we are going to need a new hashtag. The Nevis hashtag will not hold water. The emotional, psychological atmosphere on Nevis will be changed dramatically as a result of this. This is what SSZ says in his book, Discourse on Colonialism, about this. Between colonizer and colonized, there is room only for contempt, mistrust, arrogance, self-complacency, swinishness, brainless elites, and degraded masses. That's not Nevis nice. Césaire is keen to point out that the consequences for the colonizers themselves are severe. He says no one colonizes with impunity. He uses the term ethical decay to describe the complex set of ugly feelings that follows this arrangement. I was joking with my sister about what alternative hashtag we might use. We don't swear in Nevis, at least not publicly. No, I think it's against the law. Well, I was told. It's against the law. So I can't tell you the various suggestions that she came up with, but one of them has hashtag Nevis, and then the next word begins with an F and has ED at the end. I know. I told you there's some difficult points here. This is one of them. This will be a dramatically different environment at every level, including at the emotional level, and not in a good way. Unless, or because poor people and rich people, dramatically rich people, and people who are suffering financially will be next door to one another. That has never worked. It has never been a happy circumstance. I don't know why anybody would expect that it would work now. How much is that sovereignty in the window? Folks, crypto billionaires accumulate wealth at extraordinary speed. They make an enormous amount of money, and it is this money that fuels this engagement. So it means that we have to spend a moment now talking about the offer. The publicly described financial offers linked to destiny include a permanent 20% profit share for the island, split between government revenue and sovereign wealth fund. A 5% profit share is to go to individual divisions, and an annual $1 million scholarship would be given out. There'll be $50 million for infrastructure. And there will be lots of jobs. I wanted to talk for a moment quickly about jobs. Thousands of jobs, locals first. Folks, jobs are good, especially when you are poor and when you are in debt. They seem really attractive. We as Afro-Caribbean people are known for our work ethic. We are the Windrush people. We are the Headleys from In Living Color. Collectively, we abhor laziness. My grandmother used to refer to lazy people as sluggards, which even now has a resonance to me that is just shaming. We work hard. However, scholars such as Eric Williams, Capitalism and Slavery, David Roediger, The Wages of Whiteness, have successfully argued that capitalist wage labor can reproduce coercion, dependency, and unfreedom. We're talking, Roediger says here, about wage slavery, the slavery of wages. Think of the working poor. But mostly, folks, it's not clear to me why we are talking with millionaires about, or billionaires, in fact, about jobs. Crypto billionaires do not work in the ordinary sense of the word. Unlike wages or conventional business undertakings, crypto wealth is generated through early access, large-scale ownership, leverage, and rapid appreciation of assets. It is capital and opportunity, not work and jobs. So, this is a difficult part. It is capital, and it is opportunity, and it is something else. Colonialism. I want to be careful here. It is troublesome. Well, let me start here. Belgium colonized and ruled the Congo and Central Africa for many years. 1885 to 1908 under King Leopold II. This was among the most brutal regimes in modern history. Congolese people were forced into cocoa, rubber, ivory extraction to the worst forms of terror. Hands were amputated, women were raped, villages were burned, hostages were taken, executions were routine. Historians estimate that as many as 10 million people were killed there in the heart of Africa. Human suffering is still the main ingredient of Belgian chocolate. Again, I want to be careful. Obviously, Mr. Jansen had nothing to do with these horrors. I would no doubt denounce them in the strongest possible terms. However, the extractive atrocities nonetheless transformed the Belgian economy, particularly the banking sector, into one of the wealthiest in the world. So perhaps this is something what he means when he talks about giving back to Nevis. I want us to talk quickly. I'll go quickly. About basic guaranteed income. Beyond jobs, there is already at work a mechanism that would begin to change this. It's called a guaranteed basic income. It's been already implemented in places like the Marshall Islands. What would Nevis be like if we had a guaranteed basic income associated with the Destiny Project of $1,000 an individual per month? That would be $15,000 for them. But it would dramatically change the lives of individuals here. This is an initial low offer, but I just want us to get a sense of what this would mean. And to do that, I want us to have a sense of just how grinding poverty is. 2 people in a home, $2,000 a month more, that would alleviate a lot of anxiety, a lot of financial distress, wouldn't it? And it would cost them virtually nothing. I'm not even 1,000 here, and I could almost afford that. I want us to talk about the Sovereign Wealth Fund. Developers typically control the financial models while governments negotiate without full access to the underlying assumptions. This is important to recognize because the underlying assumptions, the working terms of any negotiation seem to be set by things that we do not have access to. Why is it 80-20 and not 50-50? Why? What could the reason possibly be? It cannot be a matter of risk. It can't be that they will be taking more risk than we will. We are risking everything. We have, since 1983, been risking everything in various sorts of schemes in order to survive as a country. I think 50-50 is generous. Let's talk about the $50 million US. That is a number that I think is supposed to make us feel impressed. I would be happy to have $50 million, but what does that actually mean? $50 million is just 5% of $1 billion. Folks, it is comparable to the cost of a private jet. One single private jet of the kind that we will see landing here regularly if Destiny were to arrive. That is the meaning of $50 million in the sphere of billionaire wealth. Yes, we could build hospitals, we could repair infrastructure, we could do a great number of things with it, but it might not be enough, an adequate offer. So this means that we have to look again at that national debt. $600 million actually turns out to be about the cost of one super fancy yacht. the variety, we see varieties of these off the shores of St. Kitts all the time. You know these yachts, one personal asset, one big party boat with a handful of happy people acting like they have no behavior. One single asset. If there were, so, all right, so $600 million would be a lot of Mr. Jansen's money, a little bit more than 50%, if he has just $1 billion. So that would be a strain on him, but perhaps not on them collectively. And if it were a strain, they could get a loan. They could negotiate better terms, couldn't they? They could get a second job. Folks, we want in this process to make enough money that in 7 years we can buy St. Kitts. And in that way, and in that way get them off our backs. I'm joking there. 3 of my sisters are from St. Kitts, and they would be annoyed to hear me say that. So I'm going to turn instead to Anguilla. We want to make enough money to make Anguilla want to come back under our flag. We need a national think tank. We need a whole new set of rules and strategies. What I am proposing is the creation of a sovereign national think tank to strengthen our democratic decision-making by equipping Nevis with independent analysis, rigorous research, public opinion polling, and long-range strategic thinking. The think tank would be composed of many of the exceptional West Indians we have sent abroad, scholars, professionals, and practitioners shaped by global experience. Folks, intellectual infrastructure is as essential to ongoing decolonization and independence as anything else. I sent Mr. Jansen a proposal for a national think tank some time ago. Not heard anything. In fact, I heard what I'm hearing now, which is crickets outside, frogs in the night. I expect to hear from him soon. Thank you.
I think that was wonderful. Another round of applause for Glen Griffin. So now, speedily we go on to Mr. Daniel Arthurton.
And so I said to myself, this is not a good thing. This is opportunism and not altruism. And then I asked also, I did to come back, but I decided that not only was I going out, I was going to come back and make a difference, which I've tried to do. And I've always said that I deal with leadership by example, and if you, that's something that, you know, the person can, you be my judge. And so we went forward, and then we went again, and we said, there's an economic dependency and exploitation order that was coming. And I didn't like the scent of it, you know, because it's explicit in the libertarian code of conduct or the ethos or the way they do it, the modalities, that they look for distressed economies. And to have $600 million in debt for just over 10,000 people, you know, you're talking about 6,000 million, 600 million, 10,000, you take away 3 of those zeros, I mean, you still get lost in zeros when you do the division. So I'm saying that that was very serious, and that's something. So I asked myself, is this a buyout or a bailout? Because that's the fundamental question. If you're coming to someone and so forth, I mean, the person who assisted me to go to the University of Massachusetts and so forth was altruistic and said, you know, you seem to be a bright guy, and so, you know, you should get an opportunity, because my father, there was no way he's going to be able to take me to university. So that was altruism. And so, you know, because when you see things that you can know altruism versus something else. So this was definitely, to me, a bailout, because for 600 million millstone around your head, your neck, and your non-delivery, your stewardship is failing, because, I mean, every single thing that has been started has either come to a total stop or has been forgotten by most of the people, whether it is in the airport, whether it's a hospital that's painted on the outside, whether it is all the buildings that you have, and even your own personal examples of your property that were acquired by people in leadership that haven't been used to multiply opportunities, now wealth, for themselves. So one has to ask themselves the question, is this a buyout or a bailout? And so why does this matter? Because selling or ceding strategic land under financial duress can lead to long-term dependency. That was the point that the brother made. And I totally agree with that as a student of economics. And so I asked the question, are these investments tied to transparent economic reforms, or are they just extracting concessions? You be the judge. I ask a small question, you make the big decision. Is it? Then the next question that came to my mind, is there an opportunity here for corruption? Because there's a lack of transparency. And the lack of transparency became evident when people like my classmate Kel was speaking about what our other classmate Livy was telling him, that, listen, they were going to people discreetly and asking them about enter into arrangements for the purchase of the lands. And the fact that one person, the leader, and a spouse can be the sole broker, raises a red flag to me. That was the point that I made. I mean, I wrote it. It's not like I'm hiding. I'm saying, and why does this matter? Because this can bypass the public institutions and create kleptocratic structures. We're saying that, when you do things like that, you're creating opportunities. It's a question that any reasonable person, self-respecting in a country where they vote and pay taxes, should want to ask. And so, who is overseeing? Who is guarding the guard? Are there any checks and balances? Those were the kind of questions that I was positing. I was saying, listen, people, let's talk about this. Because transferring then we talk about impact. As a student of economics, when we're doing an assessment, we do something called a PESL, which is political, economic, social, technology, and the other stuff, to make sure that you do a total overlook, a helicopter view of what's happening, and then come up with something that answers those questions in terms of its strengths, the weakness, the opportunities, and the threats. And once you do that, you're in a better position. So we wanted to get a sense, at least in my mind, trying to answer Facebook. I was saying to Facebook, what will be the impact on the local communities? Transferring 4 square miles, 10% of the landmass, or whatever numerical manipulation you decided to choose, to private foreign control could displace communities or cut off access to natural resources. Was there any thought about that? Cutting you off from a natural resource, maybe a geothermal resource, because I'm going to bring to the front later why something like this is so important to a Bitcoin person. The cost of Bitcoin mining is significant, and having access to natural resources is going to help. And, well, of course, for your luxury, you have the fishing grounds, the roads, and the farmlands. There's no desert here. And if you want to talk about desert, I had the opportunity of going to Kibbutz Gats, where I see them transform desert into, fields. I had the opportunity of going to Israel and seeing what it's like, and into the Mediterranean climate in Fresno. So when you're telling me about things, these are the questions I got to ask myself. Don't tell me that there's a piece of land out there that has been used, because that doesn't make sense in the new thinking, the possibilities, production possibilities frontier. And the question came up also, who lives or works on that land now? And I think Jean Liebert pointed that the last time we were here, and asked the question of the NIA, and suggested ways of dealing with the land situation. And then why this matters? Because you may lose access to public spaces, opportunities for housing, opportunities for improving the infrastructure. These are things that one has to think about. And so what are the resettlement or compensation plans for affected citizens? But if you're trying to do something in smart, where you go and pay somebody something like, 97 cents per square foot, there's no intention for no resettlement or compensation. There's an opportunity for extraction, maximum extraction. Something similar to Shylock. You understand? And so I'm going to leave this one, but then my puerile mind try to wrap myself around legal and constitutional violations, and I'll defer that to our great brother over there. But I just thought to myself, this might be establishing sovereignty, establishing sovereignty could violate the national constitution or international law. And the question is this even legal? And then the question is, if legal, it could bring instability, protests, and even sanctions. The people who know the song Kill the Rabbit. So I ask the question, have Parliament or the judiciary or international bodies reviewed this plan? What sort of oversight, what sort of introspection was given to this situation that's placed before us? Am I crazy? Am I not raising some of the fundamental and basic things that you would want to know as a Nevisian? with this situation that was presented, and so, you know, am I out there in the deep? So, you know, such an arrangement could cause civil unrest. You pointed out, my brother. It could cause economic stratification or future conflict over land and land rights. And these things are real, very, very real. And, yeah. So are we going to divide this country into elites and non-elite zones? But you know, one of the points that I wanted to make here is that, let me tell you, Four Seasons, our leaders said that we want something transformational. You couldn't want anything more transformational than Four Seasons Resort. Four Seasons was transformational because you know what? Every single nook and cranny, every family was touched with Four Seasons. The man who had a pickaxe, the man who had a truck, the man who had a backhoe, the man who had an excavator, the man who had a trade, the man who had family abroad, the man who had family here. Every life was touched. 5 from my household were working at Four Seasons. My sister in management, my other sister in housekeeping, my nephew in another place, my other nephew another place, and my niece another place. I mean, we're talking, you're talking about economic impact here. If you want something transformational and so forth, I kind of like it simple and incremental. And you know what? That transformational effect of Four Seasons is still ongoing up to today. They have ultra-modern facilities. Oh, man. My sister. Oh, man. Yeah, they have. Yes, so it shows family turns up when you sometimes. That's my sister from St. Martin there. Yeah, but so I was speaking about transformation, and I was thinking that, you know, if you really want a transformation, that's the kind of transformation I like. Incremental, managed. And you know, they have a lot of very high net worth people who have been living in those places down there. If you want to call it an enclave, you could call it an enclave, but believe me, they came and they decided they wanted to be a part of what was happening here. We had other people at different points in time. Bob Griffith decided he wanted to be a part of forming the Bank of Nevis. You had people like Pam Barry decided she wanted to be part of the infrastructure, the tourism. Gaskell decided he wanted to be a part. Don Morris decided he wanted to be a part. You had people like Slack who came here with a bike. These people decided they came from someplace, but they wanted to come and make a difference here. And so we are saying you can come from outside and make a contribution and be a part of the development transformational system. You understand? So what I'm saying is that you do not have to have preconditions and that go to those extremes that have, you know, revisionist laws and things like that. That's my own thinking. You don't have to agree with me. But the thing about it, I was answering Facebook. And then the other thing that happened is that, so I thought that, well, maybe there's some actions that citizens must take. We must demand transparency because none of this was transparent. Nothing here was transparent. What we were getting was an ooze. Anytime we asked a question, like Carlene over there did, she was put down with semantics and highfalutin language. You know, that's not cool. You cannot tolerate that kind of thing and so forth. We need to be responsive, be transparent. That's what we're saying. Ask public for a release of negotiation. We as the public must ask for a release of the negotiation terms. One person who has been in this country for a long time and has attempted business, my friend Lowe, he asked the question, are you saying that this is a precondition for taking it forward? And they say yes. But Lowe has had many iterations of the Ammon and different people that he has worked with, and he has been on the Homeowners Association of Four Seasons. He didn't give me permission to call his name, but I mean, I don't think I'll get sued for telling the truth. Then the other thing is to engage civil society, to support or join advocacy like this, the Nevis Civil Society Coalition, because that is how you bring things to bear. And you cannot allow anybody to go and pass any law. Numerically, you know, the Nevis Island Administration and the St. Kitts counterpart, they have the numbers to just bypass everybody, just like they did that day when they went and passed the SSZ law. So we should not take the chance with trusting the numbers, because they can go, you have 3 people in Nevis can go in and pass a law and say, stop with it, don't worry with the noise. But we got to go beyond noise and make sure that us, as civil society, we do what we're doing here. We educate each other in simple terms, not any language that condescends, but tell you the very important reason why we are feeling that we should approach this together. And then we should push for whatever redress, and I understand there are some efforts to make sure that there's some legal, I think that will make some sense, because if they got the numbers, they can go ahead. But if you take it into the legal system, you can at least slow down that speed that they have so that they're going. You know, I don't wish to tell you things that I cannot provide some basis for. And so what I did is that I decided that I'm going to make sure that as a part of my public education, I was an extension officer in agriculture, where I went around and worked with the farmers. And I had a knapsack sprayer, a rucksack, and I went out there and I spoke to the farmers. And when I spoke to the farmers, you know, I had to tell them things in a simple way. And so I decided I'll bring a libertarian primer. Because the thing about it is that if you don't know what you're dealing with, you know, it goes over your head. And I don't like things going over my head. My mentor, Charles Busu, of beloved memory, used to say, keep it simple, Stuart. Harvard principle. I studied in Massachusetts. I heard that a lot. So the thing about it, they say this society is an idea that individual freedom is the highest political value. Now, they went on to say that they have some 6 or 7 tenets. One of them is individual liberty. One of them is a non-aggression pact. One is private property rights, free market, limited or minimal government. Now, that's the one I want to zoom in on. Because within that, there are 2 versions of these people. Depending on the branch of libertarianism you're talking about. You have the minarchist, M-I-N-A-R-C-H-I-S-T-S, and those support a minimum limited to policing, courts, and national defense. That's one of the things they want to sneak in here. Because they say, he said, and I listened to him tonight to make sure I didn't get it wrong. In his question and answer, he said, the laws and the courts are inefficient. And we can provide efficiency in our system. So that one you have to go back. So teach your children that word in the short term. Minarchist. Those are persons who support a minimal state limited to policing, courts, and national defense. It means they don't want you to touch nothing else. We inside here, we do what we do, and you just deal with those things out there. Then there's another one that's called the anarcho-capitalists. This is the one where they abolish the state entirely in favor of private or decentralized institutions. And you know he said that. He said, when he was asked the question, what's the governance system? He said, well, something like a Hono, it's decentralized. You know, he said, would you have a governor or something like that? He said, no. This is what an anarcho-capitalist does. He says it, and let me tell you something, none of us should make the mistake of not listening to what anarcho-capitalists say, because within the last 10 years we have seen the departure and revisit of anarcho-capitalists that has global impact. And so you are now seeing seeping in here for this SSZ an anarcho-capitalist. This is one version of, and you know that right now in America there's something called freedom cities that's being developed by the anarcho-capitalists. If I'm wrong, prove me wrong. I'm doing the research. And so we have to make sure we pay attention. I just want to draw your attention to those two very important things. And then also they talk about personal responsibility, you know, voluntary social institution, peace and non-intervention, decentralization. But what I want you to pay attention to, because it creeps up. And in Nevis, those who know it, soft and sweet and work your belly, that's castor oil. You understand? It's a laxative for those who don't know. That's what's happening. You know, afterwards, you don't have a choice. You have to stay close to the bathroom once you've taken the castor oil. So what we're saying is that we're on our way to castor oil if we don't understand what we're dealing with. Castor oil of a different thing. But what will be coming out is the land in that segment of the country. Once you cut a peg segment from a cake, it's no longer there. And so I want to bring another little thing to your attention before I leave. Bitcoin mining, the financial and economic risks. It's high upfront costs, specialized hardware, ASIC miners, they must be specialized people. The cooling system and the infrastructure are expensive. The ongoing operational costs, electricity, maintenance and replacement hardware, and these go by quickly. It decreases its profitability over time. Mining difficulty increases over time. And block rewards have roughly every 4 years. So they're telling us you're going to have 2.5 block rewards over the time period. They're planning horizon. Four Seasons has been here for 30-something years, and they still have a planning and working horizon. These people are telling you about the $1 billion and so forth. Listen, which school of economics, Oxford Analytics, you can use the biggest name. Cambridge Analytics was coming and changing governments by data mining. So Oxford Analytics might be coming to do something of a separate sort. I have respect for people. If you come, play me straight. The people at Four Seasons, I'm saying, they come here, even if they had that intention, they came and they have developed. There's a place down there, people get employed, people work, people have progressed. I've seen it as an incubator, and I've seen it as an accelerator where people have gone on, left there, set up their own businesses. I can call 10 persons who are large business owners now in Nevis who started there. Technical operation issues when it comes to Bitcoin. The centralization risk. Mining tend to concentrate in regions with cheap electricity. We have that. We're not gonna cheap electricity. Remember, the government right now is the biggest user of electricity in our country, and among large mining pools, reducing decentralization. You got to understand that the hardware, the hardware that you use in the process of Bitcoin, it goes obsolete very quickly, and so they become outdated in a short period of time. You must understand, what does that mean? If you're a true capitalist, you want to, anarcho-capitalist, by the way, you want to make sure that you're making back your money as soon as possible, so that if you're going to jump ship, you get out of there with your bag. And so the noise and heat, that's another thing. We don't understand. When someone said that someone from banking, these guys went over there and saw the warm water place and so forth. If you go and mine in that area and do work there, you're likely to end up with a situation, if you're going to be doing the kind of work that you can do with Bitcoin mining. You understand? The mining rigs are loud and generate significant heat, making them unsuitable for homes without special setups. Where is far in Nevis? I mean, you could stay downtown and hear the power plant, and that is something that we need. So, I mean, I could tell you about the social regulatory concerns, the network level trade-offs and that sort of thing. But I just wanted to bring those couple of things to your attention. And as someone who grew up here, went to developed countries, have worked all around the world for development agencies, I think that what we need to do is to have a face-to-face discussion and let us look at the pros and cons properly. Let us have a better, let's not rush, let's hasten slowly with this one. And let us see if we can repeal or totally modify this model so that we, you can have persons who come and want to be a part of our thing that will respect our natural resources, that will want to contribute to the total development. I am putting it to you, and as I leave, if Mr. Johnson and those people had any good intention, they were around here as owners, they were Nevisians when we had COVID. If you are here during COVID and you don't help when you can, because that's the best time to come and help, the people of Nevis will never have forgotten them. If they came at that point and said, listen guys, we are going to come and do that with you, and listen, a matter of fact, they would have been able to use the Anansi factor on us. What Anansi did with his children, 5 of them, he said that he has 5 bananas. And then he said, they all look at him and said, Daddy, you're going to be there and you're not going to eat anything. Each one of them gave him a half of a banana. And Nancy ended up with 2.5 bananas. And all of them were happy. What I'm saying, if those people genuinely wanted to help this country, there was COVID. A very good example, a very great opportunity for them to have come, cemented themselves into our psyche, and work with us. They're not working with us, they're working against us. That's my submission.
I don't know how many people really understand cryptocurrency, but there's no banks, no central bank in the world, none, is allowing cryptocurrency or using it to do transactions. They're frowning it because it undermines the currency, whether it's the US currency, EU currency, doesn't matter. They don't know how much money is in the system. And the system can be undermined. You can have a run on the system. Economies like this, for example, if you have cryptocurrency here, you can use it to launder money, bring new monies into the system. And there's no checks. And as a result, we have had corresponding banking relations issues here with some of our banks, meaning that the ability for us to do wire transfers and that sort of thing can be hampered. The ability for you to clear checks, it could pretty much bring this economy to a halt. And if we lose, if big banks like Chase or big banks like Bank of America, who does corresponding banking, meaning that they clear checks in New York, on Wall Street, or wire transfers for that matter, and the SWIFT system, which is the system that they move money on. If they decide to sort of sideline St. Kitts Nevis, in terms of it's a risk, economic risk to the US system, it comes a halt to us. It's hardship for everybody here. You can't import nothing, you can't do nothing in terms of trade. The economy comes to a halt. And that is dangerous because it threatens the banking system. And please be aware, that is one of the major things that within what these guys are purporting to do in terms of data mining and all that sort of thing of cryptocurrency, it's very dangerous and it's not accepted. In terms of even converting bitcoins into cash, it's one of the most difficult things to do. It's like a drug dealer who has $100 million and can't get it into the system. It's very difficult. All right. Next, I'll call up Mr. Chesley Hamilton, a well-renowned lawyer, one of the best litigators here in St. Kitts Nevis, regarded highly And he's been at the, really on this issue of the SSZ. He'll speak directly to it, his interpretation of the law, etc.
Good night again. To quote well-learned Nevision, Dr. Henry Stukumba Brown, Chesley do not argue law with non-lawyers. So, as part of my education, I have a diploma from Seneca College in General Arts and Sciences and 2 degrees from York University in political science. And therefore, I'll prefer to use my political science education tonight in speaking to you, supplemented by my understanding not only of the political climate in St. Kitts and Nevis, but putting the SSZ into context, given that reality. I want to say to you that this book, the St. Kitts Nevis Constitution, that Sim Daniel, Ivor Stevens, Michael Powell, Kennedy Simmons, and others knew what they were doing. Unlike many people who feel like this document doesn't worth the paper that it was written on, I am one of those who sing its praises. And I want to tell you why. You see, if you're looking for an SSZ, you don't have to look no further than this. You want an SSZ? It's called Nevis. You see, a lot of people look at the St. Kitts Nevis Constitution and they say, well, that is not a federation, because St. Kitts Nevis has an island administration. St. Kitts has none. They are in a federation. What Nevis has in this constitution is a special sustainable zone, administered exclusively in a number of areas by the Nevis Island Administration. I once said to your Premier Mark Brantley some years ago before he entered politics that all I would want in this constitution is a notwithstanding clause. And he asked me what that is and what that was. And I said to him, notwithstanding the federal government jurisdiction to legislate in an area, I would want an exemption for Nevis if whatever you're legislating has a detrimental effect on the island of Nevis. That's the only amendment I will want to this document. It is not a veto, because this does not allow you to opt out altogether. A notwithstanding clause would tell you that you can opt out for 3 years and you have the right to renew it for another 3 years. The wisdom behind that is that you have to face the poll in 5 years. So if the people are with you on your exemption, they'll vote you back in. If they're not with you, you know what will happen. So I said that's all I would want in this constitution, but I liked it. You know why? The balance struck in this document is not one of equal or equal. It is one of the protection of the minority from the tyranny of the majority. It is the protection of the individual from the collective masses of the community. So Nevis has some protection of its minority population from the tyranny of the majority population of St. Kitts. And if you're going to read this document, don't waste your time reading all of it. Go to the schedules. Go to the back where the schedules are. You see, it is in those schedules that you find out that if we are going to change the federal number of of constituencies from 11, Nevis must get a third. So you have 11 right now, saying it has 8. If you're going to change the number, if you're going to 12, Nevis only have 3. So you have to give Nevis a third. So Nevis is going to get the 4th one. Because Nevis must end up with a third. So let's go further. You got to go to 13. For saying it's to get 1 to 9, they would have, Nevis wouldn't have a third because you got more than 12. So you have to go to 15. So you go to 15, Nevis gets 5, saying it's 10. Now let's look at it. You promised, what, 10,000 families? So let's do the math. If you have a population of 45 to 50,000 people and you're going to add another 10, you're up to 60. A third of 60 is 20. Nevis population is close to 10,000. So you want another 10 to get you up to 20 so that you can qualify for those 5 seats. I'm putting it in a political context for you tonight. I think that somebody took this constitution, got some supercomputers, and ran an algorithm. And say, where are the weaknesses? What can we do if we need to change this? It is not secession. It is not secession. Because if you want to know what secession is going to provide you, go again to the schedules. Schedules in the back. The schedule number 6 to section 115. I didn't tell people that section 113 is not the issue. Section 115 is the issue because section 115 tells you what is going to leave, what will be left. It tells you the water around the entity called St. Kitts would belong to the entity called St. Kitts and Nevis. The water around the entity called St. Kitts and Nevis will belong to St. Kitts. It tells you how the citizenship is going to happen. That parliament of the entity called St. Kitts will determine who has citizenship and who can be denied citizenship. So tomorrow you vote for secession, and I'm not fear-mongering. Don't get me wrong. I'm just telling you the details. You don't need an SSZ agreement when you have one inside here. The agreement is already in here, already negotiated by legal luminaries like Sim Daniel, Henry Brown, and others. It's in here, in the schedules. You ain't even got to guess what you're going to get. It's here. In the schedules, it tells you what is going to become of it if once you've already voted for secession. It tells you what is there. I am simply saying to you, go to schedule, the schedule that gives Nevis exclusive jurisdiction. It says over agriculture. It says over animals. Let me get it so that I'm not jumping all over the place. I want you to bear with me. It says in the schedule, agriculture, amenities for tourism, let's get that. Animals, it says archaeology and historical sites, borrowing, so you could borrow money, grants, that sort of thing. It goes further, cemeteries, and don't say, well, what do cemeteries have to do with anything? I'll come back to that. Let's just think that you might need an SSZ because the Americans don't want to bury anybody in Arlington Cemetery anymore, and they want to create it here or sell the U.S. government in some some agreement so that families can now come and visit the dead anywhere else. You know, you don't just think that cemeteries mean what you have. If you want to say it's an exclusive area that you can want to do whatever you want with cemeteries, that's here and provided for in your governance and your exclusive governance. Don't think it's any joke. Cinemas is another area. Conservation, isn't it that? Conservation and water supply. So when they're talking about the environment, you know, the last thing is to say anything incidental and supplementary to the list. So isn't the environment and what you need to do to manage water supplemental to conservation? You only have to use this and use your acumen to govern the island of Nevis in a sustainable way. If you'd have conservation, that's another new word. It's another new word when you talk about sustainable, because we have conservation right inside here as an area for the exclusive governance of the Nevis Island Administration. If you need anything that, and I'm going to use this word, analogous to conservation, it is provided for. It is provided for. As an exclusive jurisdiction, it has planning, development, it has trade, it has industry, it has manufacturing, it has the manufacturing of electricity. So that's how Nevelec can control electricity on the island. I don't want to bore you by going through the list, but please go and read the schedule of the areas of exclusive jurisdiction within the Constitution that the island of Nevis has. The Nevis Island Administration has to govern the island of Nevis. Professor, a people without the knowledge of the past history, knowledge and culture is like a tree without roots. Okay? I am just trying to put what you have here in a historical context, in a political context, because when I talk about SSZ, I said to them, well, why give somebody exclusive jurisdiction and tax-free status? Why don't you do, when St. Martin is tax-free, the whole of the island is tax-free, so why you can't make the whole of Nevis duty-free? So that all the business people can share in its wealth, can share in its prosperity. Why you have to give somebody an enclave, listen to the word, an enclave, a base, a reservation, or a special sustainable zone? Why? You don't need that, because I believe in equality of rights. I believe in equity. And I believe that the people of Nevis, why give somebody those rights that I call insular minority rights? And what do I mean? You see, Nevis already has what I say the minority rights protections. Now you're going to give another group of people exclusive jurisdiction over land and give them even more rights. So what they now would have is insular minority protection. It is like having a United Nations and having the Security Council, and then having 5 countries in the Security Council that has a veto. You don't need that. We all are nations. We all come here. We all come to speak and vote. Why you have to give 5 people protections that nobody else have? Why you have to give an enclave, a base, a reservation, more exclusive rights than you have already have, protected and given to you by your constitution. It simply means somebody in Cuba is creating a Guantanamo. It simply means somebody may be creating or want to create. Let's not go bad. Let's go good. Hong Kong. You know, Hong Kong was leased to the English, to the British, for 99 years. But when the 99 years finished, what happened? Went back to China. But you're not leasing, you're selling. So you ain't coming back. Hong Kong ain't coming back. Okay? Because you would have given it away forever. I want to put this in a historical context. And I want to put the SSZ legislation too in a context. Because under the section that deals with the authority to enter into the development agreement, the SSZ legislation notwithstanding any other enactment, you're going to find that phrase, notwithstanding any other enactment. So where there is conflict with what is in the SSZ, the SSZ would trump that other enactment. So the SSZ has been elevated, not to the point of the Constitution, because it says it must abide by the Constitution, but it has been elevated to what I would call almost a Bill of Rights. You see, the Bill of Rights might be just simple legislation. The Constitution is something else. And where there is a conflict, the Constitution carries the day. But when you put a piece of legislation to say where there is a conflict, this one supersedes, what you have done is that you have elevated the SSZ Act to a status of semi-constitutional. That is something that you must be very, very careful about. I'm not here talking about every line of the SSZ and going through it and boring you with line by line legalese. I'm trying to put the legislation in a way that you can go away from here, speak about it, bring it down to a level where you will understand it and be able to put it in the context of your own common understanding. So whether it is the schedules in the Constitution that tells you what Nevis has the right to exclusive governance, including planning and development. Planning and development. But that line also said, but not national development. And I chuckled when I read that one. Because if you have the right to develop, if it wants to be taken national, then let it go national. But it says that, but I am comfortable with the island of Nevis having exclusive jurisdiction over trade, business, industry, the right to even employ foreigners, work permits. You know, that is an exclusive jurisdiction of the island administration. And there are some 20 odd headings. But it doesn't just stay there within the headings. It says anything supplemental or incidental to them So if you use your imagination, you can begin to say, well, the federal government want to stop me. But you said, no, 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 no. This is incidental to that. You gave me archaeology. But I found geothermal when I started to dig. Well, this is incidental to that. How you want to come and claim it and say anything under the soil, it wasn't given to me, so it's you. No, 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 I could tell you this, so let's go to court and let me fight over that. Use your resources for the betterment and the governance of the island of Nevis exclusively. It is there. So why do I want to give a group, a set of people, or whoever, exclusive jurisdiction within what I already have as an exclusive zone? I'm asking questions. I'm not just answering them. I'm asking questions. But I'm simply saying to you, if you don't know what you have, then you're bound to repeat some of the mistakes of the past. But I am simply telling you, spend time. Get a constitution. Go through it. But again, don't just read it because you could read from beginning to end. Go to the schedules in the back. Because the schedules are like the, what's the name of the agreement there? The development agreement. The development agreement that is talk about that is supposed to have the fine prints. No development agreement comes, so they keep telling you, well, it hasn't come. We don't have a development agreement because, and therefore the development agreement has to be approved and it has to be ratified. I know the Prime Minister, and they're giving you all sort of thing about what they develop. You don't even have to guess what your development agreement is. It's inside here as a schedule. You don't have to guess. You knew what you got. The founding father and mothers, or whatever you want to call them, that put this agreement together did not leave anything to guesswork. This is not a document of compromise, as some people would like to say. I want to say this is a document of consensus. Why is it consensus? It's because, you see, when you have compromise, you have lose-lose. You ain't get what you want, and they ain't get what you want. When you have consensus, I got what I want, and you got what you want. So it's win-win. And I said that the St. Kitts Nevis Constitution is a document of consensus between the island of Nevis, that had once voted 98% to go and secede, and the island of St. Kitts, which came together in a federation in 1983, and they struck a balance of consensus. You see that 1/3 balance within the Constitution. You say, well, how almost a quarter of the population got 1/3 protection? And you see, as I said, it's not everything you need to go exact. Equity demanded that you gave the island of Nevis will have to develop itself from where it was coming a little bit more than just what its population dictates. Because if you decide everything on population, the majority population will always win. If you say, boy, look, there are 2 islands. So sometimes you have to divide things 50-50. Sometimes. Sometimes equity demands that you give more to the island of Nevis than to the island of St. Kitts, because the demand and the need is greater. That's why I like equity over equality. And you say, well, how could you say that, Mr. Hamilton? You see, if you come into this place and you ask the man with no feet to walk up the steps, that's not fair. So if you build a ramp, not only the man with no legs can come up the ramp, but the baby and the mother with the pram could come up the ramp. The person who's sick and say, I can't step up because my feet or my hip can come up. So sometimes equity helps more than equality. So you can't ask everybody to walk up the steps and say that is equal and that's fair. Sometimes equity demand that you build a ramp. I like that. I say sometimes. I say sometimes. And the youngster is asking me if sometimes, because you want me to say all the time. But sometimes equity demands that you give the person with less more. And that is the balance that you need to strike when you look at these things. And that is what I want to let you know. Not that to look at and get sidetracked with all the other things about what they're going to give you and what they're not going to give you, and you get lost in the fine print of the SSZ. But you must understand it in its historical context that the island of Nevis and the administration have exclusive jurisdiction. And I use the word exclusive jurisdiction to govern, to develop, to plan, to trade on the island of Nevis. All of it is in that schedule. And if that government wants to deal with, it must start to advocate to give Nevis, the whole island of Nevis, some of these conditions that they're now saying they're given exclusively because, oh, all developments, you know, you don't know the agreement that Four Seasons had, and you don't know the agreement that so-and-so had, and all of them are now going to come under the SSZ. You don't need it. When you have a constitution, what you need is universality. You need to say, well, why can't we enjoy the tax exemptions that you're giving so that we can create just as many jobs as they are promising there? I believe wholeheartedly that whatever algorithms they ran said to them that if you increase the population of Nevis by 10,000, it then has a third of the population. It then justifies a realigning of the federal seats. The balance of power, with that third of the seats in the allocation, with money, with planning, with foresight, we can justify that we need 5 seats in Nevis. If I could then go down to Bastia with 5 seats, we have a country to run. And I'm not saying that you must not be ambitious here, but come to the people and say to you, this is what we are about. This is what we want. And when you say you'll be in a position to buy St. Kitts, if the majority of the economic development is here and you have the money and you're creating enough tax revenue, to whom much is given, much is expected. So you may then soon, because your tax base is greater than the bigger island, it's kind of like St. Thomas and St. Croix, you will have to cut a check. You will have to cut a check. Because I am simply saying, when they're talking about sharing the money and they're talking about, oh, we have to then take out for foreign affairs and this and common services. Don't let nobody pull no wool over your eye. Do not let nobody pull no wool over your eye. Because the Nevis Island administration could say, well, I am administering these things. I can't administer something without a budget. So you cut the check for the percentage of the customs, or the percentage of the police force, or the percentage of all of these things that the Constitution says I'm supposed to administer. You cut the check and let me develop my own police force, my own. I mean, one of the areas in this is fire. I don't want to misquote it, you know. It's a fire prevention. So if it's fire prevention, is that a fire department? So why aren't they demanding the money for the fire department on Nevis? I am simply telling you, what we have to do is to read, know our history, know what our authority is, and when you do, you don't have to say, oh, you're going to pay for these and pay for that. No, 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 no. Your spending power doesn't mean you pay for everything. if I am asked to administer these things exclusively, hand over the check. Let me decide whether I am going to pay at the same level, the same as you are, even more. Hand over the check. These are the things that you must demand of your leaders when you have a document like this. We're not guessing. We're not going on conventions. We're not going on iffy, wishy-washy. It's here in the supreme law of the land. I come to you, I put it in that context. I will entertain any question, but I just wanted to put things in another perspective without boring you with some of the details of the SSG, and put it in a perspective that says, we in Nevis, whether you want to call it a zone, an island, a base, an enclave, a reservation, whatever you choose to call it, because the nomenclature has evolved to sustainable, special, sustainable zone. But don't let them fool you. These things are as old as the Hong Kong Agreement, as old as the Guantanamo Agreement, as old as any one of them. The base, the naval base in Antigua that the U.S. has there. You think the Antiguan government could tell them what plane to come in and what plane not to come in? Because the agreement said certain things, they're at liberty to go and come. They control that jurisdiction. You know, King Obstinate is still crying, who killed my sister? King Obstinate is still crying, who killed my sister? I don't want no Calypsonian in Nevis have to say, who killed my sister? You don't have to go far to know and to understand. And again, whether it was Hong Kong or is Guantanamo Bay, whether it is Chaguaramas that is now back into Trinidad hands. I have a friend who has about 200 acres of land and a nice restaurant now in Chaguaramas because he could get that because the Yankees gone and Sparrow take over now. You don't have to go. Your history is there to know and understand. And I want to bring it down to that level so that you understand that these things, no matter what you call them, bases, enclave, reservations, you know what they are. And you must decide, do I want this on the island of St. Kitts and Nevis? Lastly, the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis is about just over 100 square miles. Just over 100 square miles. You have a passport to that. I believe it's the most exclusive citizenship in the world. If you own 1 acre in this federation, you own 1 acre of 100 square miles. Your citizenship is something that you cherish dearly. I come here today to speak because a Nevisian has the same passport as me as a Kittitian. And it's not because I don't have a choice, ladies and gentlemen. I had a choice. I gave up one of the most sought after passports in the world, the Canadian passport, to participate in this democracy. And whether it's from over there or from over here, I cherish and honor that. And that is why I'm here tonight to speak. Thank you.
Let me say thanks again to Chesley Hamilton for such a thoughtful presentation. I must state that the premier we extended an invitation to that side as well to come. Of course, we did not get a response to that. But we'll take a break in a few minutes to hear a presentation over here, and then we go to the question and answer section. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your patience during this wonderful presentation. We now turn to questions. So we ask that you keep your questions brief, and we'll try to keep the answers brief as well so that we get to everyone. I've been taking notes. I hope you've been too. So Let's have it. Who has the first question?
Thank you, Caitlin. Good night, all. Mr. Hamilton, my question is directed. Hopefully you can provide us with some answer here. We have been told that the NGOs are bringing a case, filed a case on Wednesday of this week. And of course, they would have to find their own finances to hire lawyers. And our government, the federal government more than likely, the Attorney General office would be the one that I assume that this matter will be coming up against. Using taxpayers' money to hire QCs and others, and the NGO has to find their own finance. I want to know, right, to fight a battle which the people of St. Kitts and Nevis do not want this settlement, but our resources are going to be used to fight a battle for people that we are not welcoming here, because they're the ones who are going to benefit from all of this. This is very hurtful for me, this whole SSZ stuff, because I see this as very unpatriotic, what our leaders are doing. And I'm looking for the definition of the word treason. Treason. And he says here, the crime of betraying one country, especially by attempting to kill the sovereignty. I'm hoping that the NGOs would also bring a case of treason, if we can bring a case of treason against these men in our courts. Because this is there's no other definition for this other than treason. Thanks.
Now the question is whether they can bring a case, or are you more concerned about the fact that the finances of this federation would be used to fight the NGOs? I'd like to put things in political history context. In 1983, Canada, they don't say repatriate, because it didn't, there's a Canadian word called patriate, which means they brought it home. They brought home their constitution from Britain, the British North American Act. And in that was a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But because, you know, before that, they didn't really have those fundamental rights entrenched in their constitution, the Canadian government funded any constitutional matter, and I don't want to use any, but most of the constitutional matters that dealt with fundamental rights and freedoms, they funded it. So if you wanted to bring something on equality rights for women, equality rights, voting rights, all of these fundamental rights and freedoms, to give substantive meaning to the Canadian Constitution, it was funded by the government. 1983, 1983, 1983. Okay? And I don't want to say that at around the same time we were in in Britain, and the Canadian borrowed some things from us, because I know we didn't borrow nothing from them. Our luminaries were good enough that I know they borrowed from us. And I want to say that where you need to follow through to ensure the rights. With the funding, we didn't do that because it's all right to have it here, but to give it substantive meaning, we don't want to fund it. And bear with me, because it has been a personal fight on my behalf. Whether it was the boundaries cases that came out of this head, okay? The government has refused to fund, even though they lost 11 times in a row on the boundary matters. I will go further. When the government lock up someone for murder, that person is put behind bars and not given any bail. The fundamental rights and freedom and the right to liberty is taken away. And you say, well, it's good. But then you want that person who is behind bars to pay who? Chesley? Can't pay me if he's not working. And don't say the family and friends are whoever's supposed to pay. No. Every individual stands equally before the courts. So if the state is about to take back a life or threatens to take a life, due process of law entitles that person to a lawyer and to fairness and equality of arms. The state has how many lawyers? Well, there's supposed to be an equality of arms. And equality of arms means also pain from the time of arrest, not from the time of the trial. Because the state have you where they want you. They can shake you down with the police officers and the investigation and all that sort of thing. Violate your rights without a lawyer and then try you. And that is the time that you're supposed to get representation? No. From the moment they suspect you of committing any offense, you're innocent until proven otherwise. And if you as a citizen right is being threatened, rights suppose, and the protection of those rights supposed to start flowing from that point. But the government doesn't want to pay. They do not want the equality of arms. I live in a democracy. I want to be able to say, if you accuse me of something, you prove it. And I will live with the Constitution, my right to remain silent, my right to due process, my right to an attorney. All of those rights are supposed to come in a democracy. And if that is not the rights that all of us enjoy, then just take us down in the square at high noon and shoot us if you suspect us. If that's the country you want. We don't want that country. So I'm simply saying to you, this is about the fairness and due process of a democracy. We are supposed to demand that when our constitutional rights are at stake, when the right to property, the right to fairness, the right to equal treatment, all of these fundamental rights come under SSZ because you're treating people differently and giving people rights and privileges and benefits that everybody doesn't have. When that is in question and you want to take a test case and challenge the government, which the burden is on to prove these things, that should be funded by the public purse. I went through all of that to answer your question because I want you to see how it affects us in everyday life. It affects me in my own personal practice and so on, and show you that the NGOs are in the same position. But we don't want to fight these fights unless they affect us.
Good evening. Name is Jeffroy Marisha, aka DJ Marisha. Member of this St. Kitts Nevis, the Media Association of St. Kitts and Nevis. And basically, I think I'm going to have more of a statement than a question for you folks at the table. I have so far listened to first, Miss Carlin Lawrence. I don't know if she's in the room. I play the clip weekly. And I just would like to know, is this the hall where she made those statements? Okay. But my concern started with those conversations with Premier Brantley, where Miss Lawrence was told to go and read the Bible, amongst other things. From that statement, I have been following and weekly on my podcast I've been trying to get some clarity. And I've heard so many different versions since from Premier Brantley that what he did not know about, and it was a rumor. Eventually his wife became the go-between. Then I'm hearing from him that something that was not presented to the government, eventually it went to Parliament via the Prime Minister a few weeks later, on the 31st of July. Then on the 11th of June, got its second and third reading. August, sorry. Then became an act, the law, before the end of August. My good people, my concern here is, I've heard from the Prime Minister, the AG, now the gentleman, Mr. Jensen, his name is Olivier Johnson. And the more I hear from everyone, is the more I am of the view that the conversation we're having here this evening should be a non-starter. The conversation we should be having is to repeal that law. Simple. It was deceptive. The people of St. Kitts and Nevis, the people of Nevis was deceived. I have heard Mr. Jensen say for himself that he was doing whatever undercover for some 20 months, trying to get Nevisian lands without letting them know what he was doing. I want to believe if we were to go to the good lawyer here, he could tell you about deceiving people, whether you go to a shop to buy something and false pretense is against the law. It is a crime. There's so much ways for us to shut down what has happened, but we the people, for whatever reason, are afraid to stand up to these criminals. These folks we have in Parliament in St. Kitts Nevis, these folks we have in the NIA, I call them criminals, and I can prove that. So let them take me to court. This is how I feel about the situation. Their action is criminal. We speak about treason, that is a nice word. This is how I strongly feel about this whole situation. I understand Prime Minister Joe has put a committee together. He's called the Advisory Committee on this matter. There's nothing to advise about. I campaigned with the Labour Party to get rid of a former administration that we say was corrupt. I don't know if you folks in Nevis heard about the prison project, the Galaxy prison project in St. Kitts, that the former administration gave 5,500 files to for the CBI, which I understand the Prime Minister says is equal to 22 to 25,000 new citizens. He had a problem with that on St. Kitts. Yet, after becoming Prime Minister, he still signed off on the majority of those CORs. Now, fast forward to Nevis. I think some 13,000 we have in Nevis. So when you're going to come over here and put 10,000 families, I calculated 10,000 by 4. So 4,000 families in Nevis. 40,000, sorry. Now, again, if people are paying attention, these criminals that we have in the NIA, these criminals we have in the federal government, parliament, all of them, we need to hit the streets, do whatever we have to do, political action to get rid of them. Don't waste time with courts, because when I say don't waste time with courts, my good people, I don't mean it literally, don't waste time with courts, because I appreciate what I'm hearing taking place on Wednesday. I look forward to that. I have been doing my part trying to see if I could have raised the funds to get attorneys involved. I have a good friend who's an attorney. When I asked him a question about this matter, he told me that I have to pay him for the answer. I don't have the money to pay him. I have another good friend that says to me that let's wait until they sign the agreement. Well, I am of the view once that agreement is signed, it's not going to be unsigned. That agreement should not be signed. And the questions that has been taking place, what is surprising me about Nevis, and my boy Tulu, my boy Carlisle, my boy Kelvin Daly, what surprised me about them, because they are strong people, is when you guys had a meeting here in Nevis, and the Premier going to tell the people of Nevis, we are here tonight to discuss the project Destiny, not to talk about the SSZ. I have a problem with that. That meeting should have been shut down. The issue was the SSZ that created Destiny. So that meeting should have been shut down. The Prime Minister says, leave me out of Nevis business. But who brought the bill to the Parliament? So why didn't you stay out of Nevis business then? So I am saying simultaneously, my good people, I come here this evening at the invitation of Mr. Swanee, and I want to thank Swanee for inviting me here, and Mr. Charles Gaskell for inviting me here, because my good friend Glenn seems to forget I exist, even though he saw me on Saturday at Cabo. But maybe that's, I want to believe he know who I am. I cannot stay quiet, so he didn't want me to go mash up a meeting. So that's okay. I am saying to my good people at the table, I would hope that there's some success on Wednesday in sliding up this matter, because I cannot see our crazy people in NIA call the NIA Assembly and the crazy people in our parliament in St. Kitts, because they are hungry for money. This CBI project, and that is what it is a CBI scam. There's no investors coming in with money. They're going to use our CBI to build this project. And I'm saying to you all, the gentleman here, my good friend spoke about being chased out of a country. Trust me, 10,000 division, 13,000 division cannot stand up to these criminals. That is coming. And I'm calling them criminal because this is how I feel. When I listen to what Mr. Jensen is saying, when I listen to Mr. Jensen presenting himself and the program, the topics with Mr. Banky and Yoshan, that even makes me more stronger that this project must not happen. And I'm speaking to the people of Nevis. So far, I have had 3 awareness marches in St. Kitts, respectively, the 26th of September, the 31st of October, and the 21st of November. This coming Friday and the 19th of December will be my final awareness march. I want to thank Tulu Weeks and all of the folks that have come down to St. Kitts to support. People, we need to stand up in numbers. This agreement must not be signed. If we stay quiet, it is very clear that the members of the NIA, they supported it in Parliament when the bill was presented. They're going to support whatever agreement, and they have the numbers to pass it in Parliament. We cannot wait until these corrupt criminals sell out this country. I cannot stand by and allow this thing. So I am calling whatever actions you guys have to take. I just want to lend my voice to say thanks to you good folks at the head table. Thank the committee who have put this meeting together. But there are some choice words that I would like to use I cannot use here this evening. But again, I am very disturbed by the actions of the people that we elect to take care of these our beloved federation that is doing the damage that they have done to this country. Thank you.
If I could add one footnote to you, to what you said. I know many times that people take matters to the courts and expect the court to do the job. Many times the court sap political energy when you take matters to court. Both can happen simultaneously. You can have political action and you can have legal action. Do not think, well, it's in the court, so let us just sit back and wait for the courts. Please, the court, yeah, like Donald Trump has taught you, you could run the clock on the courts. It can sap political energy. So keep the political energy going while the lawyers do the legal work. Do not let one sap the energy out of the other. Thank you.
I want to thank you, Mr. Hamilton, for that response, because I firmly believe that the time is way overdue for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis to rise up, take to the street, and to shut down this country because of the impact that destiny would have on Nevis, and not only Nevis, but St. Kitts and Nevis in general. And so, yes, while we are having this legal intervention, we the people need to show up strongly, because the Premier seems to think that because he doesn't see a massive amount of persons on the streets, that he has a right to go along with what he's doing. I want to thank all of you who are at the head table, secondly. But Mr. Hamilton cleared up something for me, because the Premier has hinted that he's looking forward to having 5 seats on the island of Nevis. And I tried to rack my brain and to figure out, how are we going to get this thing to happen based on the Constitution saying that the constituency must be as close or equal as possible. And I could not get it add up. You helped me to add it up this evening, because the Premier has calculated if I can bring in the amount of families and put them over there with the rights to vote, then he can demand that 2/3, get the 5 that he wants, and then do what he wants. And I believe that he's going to pull a wool and sink it. So thank you very much for clarifying that for me and for us, the people of Nevis. Mr. Daniel Arthurton, we need to hear more of you. You have so much wisdom and understanding and knowledge of this thing. I was so enlightened this evening hearing from you, and so continue to help us rally together. And I'm looking forward to see some of you in St. Kitts on the 19th, which is Friday, as we continue this awareness, the last for this year. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry I came in late. Nevis is crazy busy tonight. I've been involved in nearly 4 engagements, but I was determined to reach here, and I got here late. The name is Bonnie Byron. Just 2 little simple things have upset me very badly. I have a friend who told me that he was approached in 2021 by Mrs. Brantley, who asked him to sell his land over in that area. I don't know what you call it. Right. And another friend of mine said that she was approached before COVID. COVID was when? Yeah. Another friend of mine told me she was approached before COVID. So that's 2019. My friend was approached in 2021, told Mrs. Brantley that he's not going to sell his land. And so she put some white person to call him. I don't know the white person name. Doesn't matter. So I am very upset. I'm very alarmed. I said to the Premier that this whole thing is very alarming to me. That this thing has been going on for what now? 5, 6, 7 years? And, well, I for one, maybe the rest of you have been hearing about it. But this year is the first time I'm hearing about it. When 2 of my friends were approached, one before COVID and one after COVID, and about this thing. So I'm extremely upset about this. So my question, but who exactly is Mrs. Brantley working for? Sorry? Yeah. Who exactly is the Premier's wife working for? I understand at some meeting at the other, the Premier said, leave my wife's name out of this. So if Mrs. Brantley could approach a friend of mine to ask my friend to sell his land, and when he said no, he was still pursued. Who exactly is she working for? I am very, very disturbed that this thing has been in the works for some 5 to 6 years. I'm extremely disturbed about it. And how come I just hearing about it this year? You know? Premier Brantley asked me a question in a very public space at the rededication service of the Methodist Church. Reverend Byron, am I still your friend? And my answer in this public space is Jesus commands us to love everybody. So I love everybody. It doesn't mean I like everybody. When somebody is not upfront with me, it is very, very disturbing to me. And I cannot trust them. Okay? So I'm still befuddled. When did this thing all start? I'm still befuddled. And it's very simple for me. I keep it simple. You bring in 7,000 to 10,000 people in here. That is going to change the face of Nevis forever. Right? I live right here in Charlestown. Now, you know, rich people could go in their mansions and shut themselves away from the thing. I live right here in Charlestown. When these foreigners come in here, they could come into my space, would call it my zone. I have no protection against them. But I can't go into their zone. They have all the protection against me. Poor little me who could do them nothing. They have all the protection against me, but I have no protection against them. The people who are making these decisions for me, they could go into their mansions, they have their security, whatever it is. Right? So when these foreigners come, I am out in the open. No protection at all. It is very, very disturbing to me that somebody has made these decisions for me and still expecting me to be their friend. It is very, very disturbing for me. What is my future? I'm sleeping in my bed at night. What drug lord, what this can come around, walk in my space, and I have no protection. I keep it very, very simple. Very, very simple. All right? I can't go into their zone, but they could come out into my zone. I keep it very, very simple. Second question, is there a contract to be signed? Has the contract been signed? Has the contract not been signed? It's too many unanswered questions for my simple little brain. And I don't know if anybody could answer my questions tonight. I'm keeping it simple. Thank you very much.
You know, civil society has the ability to make the country ungovernable, and they have the ability to make the country unmanageable. Here is where the voter base is. Here is where the congregations are. Here is where every civic community people are. And I would advise those in government who are elected for 5 years, who has to come back to civil society, to begin to ponder their decisions. Anybody else?
Good evening. I just need a clarification. I believe maybe the lawyer might be in the best position to answer that question. I suppose others can as well. Simple question, because I heard it referred to this evening, that the signing of the development agreement by the Nevis, well, I guess by the Premier, but by the NIA, makes it binding. I just want to ask the question, is that really so? Bearing in mind that it is clear that it needs ratification by the federal government. It would seem to me that it cannot be binding when it is clear that it needs ratification. So just could you clarify that for me, please?
Only the parties to an agreement are bound by it. The issue is they're trying to make agreements like this come under a bigger umbrella, a piece of legislation. And that is why the Prime Minister is afraid to repeal. Because if he repeals the federal legislation, there's nothing to stop the Nevis Island administration from proceeding. Absolutely nothing. So, the Prime Minister is in a panic. He doesn't need to. He can repeal and replace the same day. Let me say it again. He can repeal and replace the same day. So, he's afraid that if he repeals, the Premier will just proceed with his agreement. Because there's nothing to stop the Premier from doing what he has to do within the ambit and edicts of the NIA. Whether it's about land, the environment, conservation, development and planning, trade, you name it. And the Constitution allows for the Nevis Island administration to bring into being institutions that mimic the federal ones for the island of Nevis. You again just have to go and read the schedules and see which areas are so affected within the Constitution. For whatever purpose. It could be for security. It could be, as I said, for fire prevention. Whichever institution, just like you have your Nevis Island Administration, civil service, there are other parts of the civil service and other institutions that the Nevis Island Administration and its jurisdiction can bring into play for the development and planning and business of Nevis. You just need to find the necessary heading. And again, matters incidental to can be also, and I use another word, analogous to. So it is not just the word there. It is broader than that in its context. So I am saying to you, it is one thing to say, it has to be ratified, because the Prime Minister would say, well, all of these things under the SSZ must come to Parliament for ratification. But again, that is why I don't like to speculate and I don't like to talk about things that are not there. It's one thing to have an agreement. If there's an agreement between the parties of the developer and the Nevis Island Administration, ratified by the NIA, then that needs, on the advice, go to the federal cabinet, and the Prime Minister shall, if that SSZ legislation is removed, when it comes to the island of Nevis, the Premier and the NIA have the exclusive jurisdiction to enter into that agreement. And I challenge anybody to tell me that that is not so.
Good evening. I'm Carl Manners, and I've been told that I'm loud, so I'm going to make a special effort this evening to be not loud. Okay. I'll just share with you my experience over the last 2.5 years, going on 3 years. I've been approached by Miss Sharon Brantley from 17 degrees north about some lands I have in the area. I said to her, not interested in selling the lands. She kept after me. She said that the developers are willing to pay above market value. I said, I'm not interested. I had to do a few things to get her to stop harassing me. That stopped. I was in Vaughn's Village by a friend of mine. I got a phone call, an unknown number from Hawaii. And I'm going, well, I don't know anybody in Hawaii. Who is this? Miss Flora O. of South Nevis Limited. Starting again about lands in the south, and I said, I've been, well, before that, I've been called into a conference call by Miss Brantley with a man called Joseph, no last name. And after 20 minutes, he's asking me if I'm interested. I said, interested in what? You haven't told me anything to be interested in as yet. He said he'll send me proposals. And up until like a year and a half later, when I was called from Hawaii, I had nothing from him. So this lady sent me some files of, she started talking about land swap. I said, I'm not interested. She kept on, she said she'll send me some files and I could look and see if I'm interested. So I said, okay, no problem. She sent me the files. Land in Lower Webb's ground, Indian Castle, Lower Hickman's, I think Padlock. And I know these areas because I live in the area. So I said to them, let me just check and see what's going on. When they think that I'm checking to see where lands are, I know where the lands are. I was checking to see whose land they're trying to swap me. And the lands were not in their name. It was not in South Nevis Limited's name. But they're offering me people else's land. So I kind of told myself, I could take my jail my own self. I don't need them. So I told them, if they're offering me 2.25 acres of land for 1 acre, make it 2.5 acres and 250,000 US dollars. The Joseph keep coming back. I said, are you going to agree to the money part of it? He says, no. I said, well, then stop. That took care of that. The interesting thing is that they are trying to sell me or swap me lands that they don't own. And this is insulting. It's insulting because they think that they're talking to stupid people. That I can't tolerate. And when people are saying that I'm angry, I have reasons to be angry. And if it were them, they should be angry too. They should be angry too. I've got all sorts of things said. The lands are over there for 100 years, they haven't been used. And anybody that says that don't know what they're talking about. Because I grew up in the area, living with my grandfather, running animals in that area. And if that was not being used, they're sick in the head. My grandfather had anything like between 400 and 500 head of mutton over there at any given time. All the butchers in Nevis, and that was a thriving industry. Manure, trucks used to come by the truckload. I lived with my grandfather over there from 1971 until late 80s when he left over there. And you're going to tell me that nothing go on over there for 100 years, and I'm over 100 years old. The lands I got in that area, you cannot tell me that I have not done anything with them, because those lands have secured loans for the trucks I own. They sent my children to school, over $100,000 a pop. You're going to tell me that them lands not been used? If I didn't have them, God knows how I would have managed. I would have to just sit back. But because I had the papers for those lands, I was able to put them up to the development bank, get financing to put my children to school. And if you're going to tell me that that's not proper use of lands, I don't know anybody who could decide for me what I do with my land. The other insulting thing is Mr. Jensen on his interview with Banky and Shadan. Yasan, yeah. Said, I think I lost my train of thought. Yeah. Anyway, no, the $30 thing, that's a joke, you know. Oh, yes. Mr. Janssens have said that he will make, when he buy the land from me for next to nothing, he will make, I could come over and invest in his development. I think he's out of order. I asked the Premier earlier o'clock if when he was having his discussions with the developers, did he have the people of Nevis in mind? He went around the bush. I asked him a second time. When I realized he wasn't going to answer, I moved on to the other question. When you were discussing with the people, the developers, did you discuss a partnership with the people of Nevis, since the people of Nevis own the land, and they have the big plans, and they claim they have money, a partnership with the owners? And when he said he discussed that with them, I know he was lying, because they told me and a cousin of mine who owns about 10 acres in the same area, no lease. They want to buy outright. They've been telling people, I mean, a good friend of mine offered to sell a part. They said, no, they want all. But I'll let them tell you themselves. Sorry.
Sorry, I would try.
The question, Mr. Hamilton.
Yes.
The legal part of it. Well, from what you were saying, it sounds to me like the legal part, the law, the SSZ law, or SSEZ law, whichever it is, from time to time, is neither here nor there when it comes to the Constitution of the Federation. No? Okay. I'll give you a chance. Give me a chance to ask another question, because these are questions that come to me. When I'm out working, you know, my mind's working, I go like, I've seen a plan of what they're proposing, and it spreads from Long Point to Whitehall. It spreads right over the area, including the lands that people have said they're not selling their land. I'm wondering, how is that going to work? And at one time, it came to me, he says, I'm telling myself, it looks like I'm going to have to make up my mind which law I'm going to have to abide by. Because they put this area over me. And then I told myself, well, it's not so bad because it's a tax-free area. And they put the tax-free area over me, so maybe...
I'm going to interject at this juncture just to let you know that I want to apologize because I have to catch the last water taxi to go back down. I would love to stay in lovely Nevis, but the wife isn't feeling too well today, and therefore I'm duty bound to do my husbandly duties and go back down. But any questions could be sent to Mr. Glenn Hobart, who will forward them to me, and I'll try my best to answer them from a legal standpoint. I just didn't want to get into some of the legalese because you're talking about within original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court and so on, and I'll have to go in and try to explain all of that to somebody and what that means in terms of the legal jurisdiction under the Constitution and the Supreme Court of the West Indian Supreme Court Act and all sort of different legalese and hoops to jump through. So I really didn't want to get into the legalese tonight, but if you send any specific questions on the law, I'll do my best to answer them. But I really wanted to put my presentation tonight within the political context so that it could be part of the universal discourse going forward. Sorry I got to run, but blame Mr. Glenn Herbert for not putting in place exclusive transportation for me tonight. Thank you all again, and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. Thank you very much to the panelists. I definitely want to encourage more young people to engage in this conversation. I want to encourage us to support each other, and also want to say it is okay to speak up, it's okay to question, and it's okay to disagree. So thank you very much for your engagement. Thanks to JD's production for doing their thing tonight and simulcasting this presentation as well as recording it for us. Thanks again to the panelists, thanks to you, the audience, thanks to Nevis Civil Society, Coalition of NGOs for putting this together so that we could all come together and begin to have a unifying voice. I will allow the two panelists to give a closing statement if you would like. You have the floor.
I think it's advisable that we pursue simultaneously a variety of strategies. That way we have less chance of losing. I understand that in a way now that I didn't before, the particular set of personal urgencies associated with this. But it's also the case that this is a matter that goes beyond our own individual concerns, the long-term health and survival of this country. I think if we adopt that perspective, things might look a little different. For all of its, for everything that's problematic about its approach, it still constitutes for us an opportunity. Opportunities that would satisfy all of the various concerns that we have here in one way or the other. So from my point of view, that is how it ought to be pursued. As a chance, not simply as an insult, which it most certainly is, not simply as another grab, not simply as the exploitation of our goodwill, not simply as a matter of greed, but still nonetheless an opportunity. We can make something
good out of this for us, our children, and our future. That's how I think about it.
Yeah. I just want to thank those persons of the Nevis Civil Society Coalition of NGOs for the opportunity to come and share the platform with these distinguished persons who have really enlightened even my thinking some more on the matters related to this SSZ. Like I've always said, for those who know me, be not selfish with your doing, pass it on. If you live for yourself, you live in vain. If you live for others, you live again. So I think that it's important that we share as much as possible on these matters, sharpen the minds of each other, because it's through discussions with our contemporaries or peers that we were able to get this matter brought to a place where we are now able to look at possible outcomes, although we have seen some of the impacts already, and they're not the most favorable. So I want to thank each and every one of you who have come out to support this. I too encourage persons to continue to put your widow's mite in this whole mix, because it makes a difference. And we have to do things collectively. And the people across our diaspora, other Nevisians, other people from the Federation, other Afrocentric people are looking at us and wondering if we are going to allow ourselves to go back to the forgotten window in Ghana in 2025.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. That's a wrap. Hopefully we'll see each other again soon.